What if the very thing you call love is actually the chain that's keeping you trapped? What if the reason you can't walk away from someone who hurts you isn't weakness, but a powerful psychological bond designed to keep you stuck? That bond has a name. It's called a trauma bond. And once you understand it, you'll begin to see your story with new eyes and finally learn how to break free. Today, I want to take you on a journey of uncovering the truth about trauma bonds, what they are, how they form, the signs that you may be living in one, and most importantly, how to find your way out. When people hear the word love, they think of warmth, safety, care, and devotion. But when you find yourself in a trauma bond, love doesn't feel like that. It feels confusing, intense, and sometimes even dangerous. A trauma bond is not genuine love. It is an attachment that forms when cycles of pain and comfort become intertwined. Imagine this. Someone wounds you with their words or actions, and then they're also the one who provides the comfort afterward. Over time, your heart starts to associate the source of the wound with the relief. This is what makes trauma bonds so powerful and so deceptive. The same person who creates your deepest pain is also the one who temporarily soothes it. That back and forth creates a loop in your brain, wiring you to stay even when everything inside you screams to leave. You don't stay because you enjoy the pain. You stay because your brain has confused the person with the healing, and you're constantly chasing that sense of relief. The love you think you feel is really the survival mechanism of your body, trying to latch onto the only source of both chaos and calm in your environment. It's like standing in the middle of a storm, but every once in a while, there's a brief moment when the sky's clear, and you convince yourself the storm is worth enduring just to glimpse that sunlight again. That fleeting moment is what keeps you bound, what convinces you that if you just hold on a little longer, maybe the sunlight will last. But in reality, the pattern is designed to repeat, and it's in that repetition that the bond strengthens. The cycle is what hooks you. It begins with the dazzling high, the moments when you feel chosen, special, maybe even adored. They shower you with attention, affection, or promises that make you believe this is real love. That stage feels intoxicating because it validates the deepest parts of your heart that long to be seen and valued. But then slowly the devaluation creeps in. Criticism, manipulation, neglect, or rejection. Suddenly the person who once lifted you up begins to chip away at your confidence, and you start to question your worth. You try harder, give more, compromise more, hoping to get back to those golden moments when everything felt perfect. Just when you're ready to walk away, they flip the switch again. They apologize, offer affection, or give you just enough tenderness to pull you back in. That sudden change reignites your hope, and you convince yourself the relationship is salvageable, that maybe you've misunderstood, that maybe the good outweighs the bad. This unpredictable roller coaster is what keeps you bound, because your nervous system becomes addicted to the highs and lows. The pain makes the small glimpses of pleasure feel more meaningful than they are, and you start mistaking intensity for intimacy. Instead of recognizing the cycle, you cling to the idea that the person who hurt you can also heal you. And the more times you go through that loop, the deeper the hooks go, until you no longer know whether you're staying out of love or out of fear of losing the only source of comfort you think you have. That is how a trauma bond operates. By keeping you locked in a cycle that convinces you to confuse chaos with passion, suffering with love, and attachment with worth. One of the most haunting aspects of a trauma bond is how it alters the way you see yourself. When you are stuck in such a relationship, your sense of identity becomes tied to the person who holds the power in the bond. You start questioning your own thoughts, doubting your feelings, and second-guessing your decisions. The person you are bonded to often uses manipulation, subtle or blatant, to make you feel responsible for everything, both the good and the bad. If they're happy, it's because you behaved the way they wanted. If they're angry, it must be your fault. Over time, this erodes your confidence until you find yourself walking on eggshells, adjusting your every move just to avoid conflict. The danger is that you begin to forget who you were before the relationship. You lose sight of your values, your dreams, and even your voice, because everything inside you has been conditioned to revolve around keeping the peace. It's not that you are weak. It's that the constant push and pull has rewired your brain to focus on survival rather than growth. And survival, in this context, looks like silencing yourself so you don't trigger the next storm. That constant self-suppression drains you emotionally, leaving you exhausted but still hooked, because every now and then, they reward your silence with affection, making you feel like you did the right thing by compromising. But in reality, every compromise chips away at your authentic self, making it harder and harder to remember the version of you that once stood tall, vibrant, and free. This is one of the most damaging consequences of a trauma bond. Not just the pain it causes, but the identity it steals from you along the way. Another powerful element that keeps trauma bonds alive is the hope for change. Hope can be both a gift and a trap. In a healthy relationship, hope is about growing together, facing challenges, and building a future on mutual respect and love. But in a trauma bond, hope is weaponized against you. You hold on to the memory of who they were in the beginning, the version of them that made you feel cherished and alive. You replay those moments in your mind and convince yourself that if you can just do the right thing, give enough, or prove your love deeply enough, that version of them will return. This hope becomes the chain that binds you, because instead of accepting the reality of their behavior, you cling to the illusion of their potential. You tell yourself they didn't mean it, or they're just going through a hard time, or if I just love them better, they'll change. This hope blinds you to the truth, and every time they throw you a small breadcrumb of affection or an apology, it reignites the fire, convincing you that maybe, just maybe, things will get better. But what you don't realize is that this cycle is deliberate, whether conscious or unconscious on their part. By giving you just enough to keep you invested, they ensure you never fully walk away. And because you are emotionally invested, your mind latches onto every positive sign as evidence that your patience will eventually pay off. The problem is that the longer you hold on to this hope, the deeper the bond grows, and the harder it becomes to separate illusion from reality. You begin to tolerate more, excuse more, and sacrifice more of yourself for a future that exists only in your imagination. And while hope is a beautiful thing when directed towards something real, in the context of a trauma bond, it becomes the very thing that locks you in, convincing you to stay chained to a promise that was never meant to be fulfilled. Fear plays a massive role in keeping people trapped in trauma bonds, and it's not always the kind of fear that looks obvious on the surface. It isn't just fear of anger, fear of abandonment, or fear of conflict. It's also the deeper, more subtle fear of being alone, of starting over, of facing life without the person who has become both your comfort and your chaos. When you've been in a relationship defined by intense highs and lows, the brain becomes conditioned to expect volatility. The uncertainty becomes familiar, even though it is painful. And the idea of walking away from that, of cutting ties completely, feels terrifying because it forces you to step into the unknown. Many people who are trauma bonded say that they feel safer staying in the toxic relationship because at least they know the patterns, even if those patterns are destructive. This is what makes fear such a powerful tool of control. It convinces you that leaving is far riskier than staying, even when staying is destroying you slowly. This fear is compounded by the erosion of your self-worth over time. You begin to believe that no one else will want you, or that you won't survive without the person who has been both your source of pain and the only one who occasionally soothes it. That paradox keeps you locked in, because the very person causing your suffering is also the one you feel you need to alleviate it. Fear feeds the illusion that you are powerless, that breaking free is too hard, too costly, or too lonely. But what makes fear so effective in trauma bonds is how it blends into your daily thoughts. It whispers in your mind when you consider leaving. What if no one else loves you? What if you regret it? What if you can't make it on your own? Those questions burrow into your self-esteem until you're convinced that staying put is the safer option. Fear doesn't just control your actions. It takes hold of your imagination, painting the future as bleak if you dare to walk away, even though the truth is often the opposite. Alongside fear comes the powerful force of guilt and shame, which further deepens the chains of a trauma bond. Guilt makes you feel responsible for the other person's behavior, convincing you that if they lash out, it's because you pushed them. If they withdraw, it's because you failed them. Shame tells you that leaving would mean you gave up, that you were weak, or that you weren't good enough to fix the relationship. Both guilt and shame distort your sense of responsibility, placing the weight of the entire relationship on your shoulders. You begin to carry burdens that were never yours to carry. If your partner manipulates you into believing you're ungrateful, selfish, or disloyal for considering walking away, guilt becomes the leash that pulls you back every time you try to leave. And shame reinforces it by whispering that you're somehow defective for ending up in this situation in the first place. People trapped in trauma bonds often ask themselves, "What's wrong with me that I can't make this work?" Or, "Why can't I be strong enough to handle it?" That internal dialogue is not accidental. It is the result of prolonged conditioning, where guilt and shame are used as weapons to control you. What makes these emotions so destructive is that they not only tether you to the toxic relationship, but also eat away at your self-image, making you believe you don't deserve better. Guilt tricks you into focusing on their needs above your own, while shame convinces you that your pain is a reflection of your inadequacy. Together, they create a cycle where even when you think about leaving, you immediately drown in feelings of failure or betrayal, pushing you back into compliance. Over time, guilt and shame silence your voice, suffocate your truth, and keep you shackled to someone who thrives on your self-doubt. And the cruel reality is that as long as guilt and shame dominate your inner world, freedom feels impossible, even though it is exactly what you long for most. Breaking free from a trauma bond is not about waking up one morning and suddenly deciding you're done. It rarely works that way, because the hooks that keep you tied are emotional, psychological, and sometimes even physical. Healing is a process that requires intention, patience, and persistence. The first step is awareness, being able to name what you're experiencing for what it is. When you realize that the pull you feel toward this person isn't love in its purest form, but rather a cycle of reward and punishment that has conditioned your brain, you begin to separate the illusion from the reality. Education becomes powerful here. Learning about trauma bonding, understanding how intermittent reinforcement works, recognizing the role of fear, guilt, and shame, all of this gives you clarity. That clarity chips away at the fog and makes it harder to deny what's really happening. But awareness alone is not enough. You also need to begin the difficult practice of detaching, not only physically but emotionally. This may mean setting strict boundaries, limiting or cutting off contact, or removing yourself from environments that pull you back into the cycle. It may mean leaning on a support system of friends, family, or professionals who can remind you of the truth when your mind starts playing tricks on you. Healing is not linear. There will be moments of doubt, relapses of hope, and waves of longing. That doesn't mean you're failing. It means your brain is rewiring itself after being conditioned for so long. Just as trauma bonds are built through repetition, breaking free requires consistent acts of self-affirmation, acts that remind you of your worth and your right to peace. Reclaiming your identity is a central part of the process. Many people in trauma bonds lose sight of who they are, what they value, and what they deserve. Recovery means rediscovering those pieces of yourself, nurturing your independence, and building a life that no longer depends on the approval or validation of someone else. It's about learning that freedom, though uncomfortable at first, becomes the soil where your healing grows. Once you begin that process of detachment and healing, the final key is shifting your perspective from survival to empowerment. A trauma bond often leaves you believing that you are broken, that your ability to love and trust is permanently damaged. But the truth is, surviving such a bond shows extraordinary strength. The same qualities that kept you enduring, your loyalty, your empathy, your ability to hope, are not weaknesses. They are strengths that were exploited. When you reclaim those qualities and redirect them toward yourself, they become your greatest tools for building a healthier future. Empowerment comes from recognizing that your story is not defined by what you went through, but by what you choose to do with it now. Instead of asking, Why did this happen to me? You begin to ask, what can I learn from this and how can I grow? This shift changes everything. It allows you to see that you are not chained to your past, but instead equipped by it. Healing from a trauma bond gives you a deeper understanding of human behavior, a stronger sense of self, and a greater compassion for your own journey. Empowerment also means taking active steps to create new patterns. It might be through therapy, journaling, meditation, or practices that ground you and strengthen your inner voice. It might be through learning to say no without guilt, to trust your instincts again, and to celebrate small victories that prove you're moving forward. What once felt like a prison can become the foundation for your transformation. And as you embrace empowerment, you begin to feel a shift. You're no longer surviving the bond, you're transcending it. You begin to trust yourself again, to see yourself not as someone who was trapped, but as someone who broke free and now carries the wisdom to build healthier, more fulfilling connections in the future. If any part of this resonated with you, know this: you are not alone, and you are not broken. Understanding trauma bonds is the first step to breaking free from them. And freedom is not just possible, it's waiting for you. Now, I want to hear from you. Did this message speak to your experience? Share your thoughts in the comments. I promise your story might be the very thing that helps someone else heal. If you found value in this video, hit that like button, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe for more conversations that empower and transform. And before you go, tell me, what topics would you like me to explore next? Your voice shapes this community, and together, we can build a space where healing and growth are not just possible, they're inevitable.